Everyone, thank you for joining our special school board meeting here tonight on Monday, March 7th. If you have the agenda in front of you, the first item deals with our strategies. The second item deals with the link that is live on YouTube. The third item deals with our face coverings policy. And then item number 4 on the agenda is the call to order. So, Ms. Steves, will you please determine if we have a quorum present?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do.
Okay, thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Bellingham, thank you for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. You're welcome. Brings us to item number 5, the approval of the agenda. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I may, here I would like to move on agenda item 9, consideration approval of fiscal year 23 budget reductions, that the board takes items A through J in one motion for that particular action.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to take item 9A through 9J and move them into one motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Mr. Robichaud. Further discussion on this? Mr. Olson.
I was under the impression that we were going to take item per item
That is the way it is on the agenda.
on the agenda, then all of a sudden it's a last-minute change on that. So I think each item should be discussed, because they're separate, but they're intertwined.
Okay.
So I'll be voting no on this.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to speak in favor of my motion. First of all, we've been at this now, I believe, for 4 to 6 weeks here. I've gone through each one of these thoroughly, analyzed them. I went back and watched the tape from our last 2 board meetings and work sessions, and there was pretty much consensus. There was consensus from A through J, and I believe we've had enough discussion, work, emails, et cetera, in these 4 to 6 weeks that these can be acted upon in one motion, and then address the remaining 3.
Okay, Mr. Robichaud?
Mr. Chair, discussion relevant to the motion also. I agree with Mr. Bellingham that we have spent a good deal of time and diligence looking at all those different items, and it's not easy to do any of them, but we have come across, I think, in consensus that those are ones that we'll have to do because of some declining enrollment. I'm not sure that our time would be best spent rehashing what we've done for the last 3 or 4 board meetings. So that's why I seconded the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robichaud. Any further discussion? Mr. Sesker, just for clarification, I believe items A through J, is that basically the $800,000 bucket that we've seen for
That's
several
correct.
weeks? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No, roll call, please.
Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham.
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier. Aye. Richard Olson.
No.
Jerry Robichaud.
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-1.
Okay, so essentially what we'll do is item 9A will be that new bucket, if you will. K will now move to 9B. L will move to 9C. And M will move to 9D. Any further items, motions before we approve the agenda as is with that stated approved amendment? Okay, hearing none, I guess I now need another motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 5-1. Thank you. That brings us to item number 6, consider approval of baseball cooperative sponsorship with Bethlehem Academy. And I believe Mr. Kleiner is here, as well as our head coach, Mr. Lechtenberg. Come on forward if you'd like. And thank you for being here. You're good. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, members of the school board. I'll try to be brief. It's not too different than when we met a couple weeks ago about golf, but we're going to talk specifically about baseball first. We believe the formation of a co-op would be able to just help us sustain and then ultimately grow our program. Currently, the Big Nine schedules varsity, JV, and ninth grade. Without this, there's no chance we'll have 3 levels this spring. And just a little background knowledge too on that. Big Nine meeting last week with ADs. They have already voted to approve this because they find it a hindrance to their schedules when we don't have the levels that they expect of us. So it not only hurts our students when we don't have the levels that we need, it hurts our opponents too, and doesn't shine a good light on us from a conference standpoint. So a lot of this is stemming from that, just to be good conference members, but also to help our programs. Because if you don't have a ninth grade team, then you got maybe ninth graders that are playing at JV where they shouldn't be, and it just kind of trickles down from there. So this helps, having the levels we're supposed to have helps every student play at the kind of more their appropriate age and skill level than being pulled up too soon, too early. So this is Coach Charlie Lechtenberg. Do you want to add anything, Charlie?
Yeah, like Kevin said, last year, we weren't able to field 3 levels. We canceled most of the ninth grade season. A lot of those players didn't come back out because of that, so our numbers have dipped down. I mean, they weren't able to play, and when they were moved up to JV, so that really hurt numbers too. So adding this co-op would, make us be able to play 3 levels, and kids could play in the appropriate place. Also last year, there were several times we only were able to play 1 level. So that's a big struggle, and I know opposing coaches would come and they're like, what's going on? Why aren't we able to play a ninth grade and JV? Because we didn't have the arms, and now with the State High School League, they have a pitch count in too, which makes it even harder. Adds a whole other aspect of, kids have to get certain rests, so that made us cancel more games last year because we didn't have those kids, and like I said, that we could only play varsity level at some times, and it wasn't, and again, we're pulling up kids on varsity that weren't ready because we needed those numbers, so this would help us be more competitive, but also keeping those kids at the right level and keeping them out because they'd be playing at the appropriate spot.
Thank you. Board members, any comments or questions? Mr. Kleiner, I do have a question for you. Just on the form, the 2-page form, it does talk about a deadline no later than 30 days prior to the first day of practice for that sports season. I believe this is a state form. We're covered, we're in the clear if this gets approved?
Good question. So been in contact with the high school league this whole process, and it's not in writing, obviously, in the high school league handbook, but if you are kind of in communication with them and let them know you're working on it, they basically give you until the start of the season. So they know that we're having this meeting tonight. That was one of their questions, are you on a school board agenda? We got thankful to all of you, March 7th tonight to do that. So they're aware, and as soon as, if it gets approved and signed, we'll get the paperwork over to BA for them to sign it, and then it will be submitted, hopefully no later than Wednesday this week to the high school league. So they're well aware, they're in the loop.
Okay, thank you. And this is a 2-year agreement like all co-ops,
Yep.
is that right? Okay. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Olson?
I'm a little confused. Of course, I support cooperatives. Didn't last year the board voted to dissolve the cooperatives? Is that we took a vote on that?
Yeah, I believe it's every sport is individual and looked at individually. So last year was boys soccer, girls soccer, and gymnastics. And this year it was boys and girls golf, which we approved, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Sorry, my Mondays
So
are
we didn't
running
dissolve all the cooperatives?
No, correct. Yep.
Are there thoughts to revisiting the co-ops that we dissolved last fall, spring, whenever that was?
Do you want me to
Yeah.
comment on that? 100%, I'd love to. Just to be totally transparent, it was kind of doing these, being new, doing the spring ones, kind of seeing how that went. But I actually think we 100% should bring those 3 back, yes. So that was going to come probably in April meeting or something.
Okay.
Kind of get through, I mean, we could do it now if you want, but I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but absolutely, that will be coming down the pike. These are in the moment, so we do
Gotcha.
tackle these ones first, but I will be looking to reverse some of that down this spring and before the fall season for both soccer programs and next winter for gymnastics.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about what you're just saying. So my understanding is we approved a flow chart that would help us make decisions. And so I would need to see sort of what was fundamentally different from last year to this year that would have us revisiting those co-ops already this year, that the numbers were that significantly different. I am not 100% in favor of co-ops. I think they have to follow that the protocol that we put in place. It was a really difficult process for us to go through that work, so I want to make sure we don't lose that progress. If we need the co-ops and they're in the best interest of Faribault Public Schools, I'm all in support of them. But I hope that's what you mean.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you want to get into those 3 right now.
No, I
No,
don't.
we don't.
I didn't think so.
Nope.
so-
Sorry.
But-
Just because they're not germane to
Yep.
the baseball
Yep.
at hand. So I have given a little bit of grace to the conversation. When it's time, you'll bring it back and we'll discuss it at that time. So, any other comments regarding baseball co-op as we sit?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kleiner and Mr. Lichtenberg, thank you for bringing this forward. You have listed the number of participants we have at Faribault High School. With the co-op, is there any indication the number of participants that might come from Bethlehem Academy?
You want to go first?
Yeah, we have, if we were to do it, they'd probably, between 10 and 15 players, which would definitely add back a JV level for us, and our 9th graders could stay at the 9th grade level, so just adding, whatever they have, but it's from 10 to 15, somewhere in there, and might even be more once they know, because, we're co-opted all summer long, they play together all summer, so I think if it does go through, a lot of kids would come out, even back out, because they're able to play together all summer, and they're just used to playing with each other, and it's kind of tough when we go in spring and we're separate, and it would just be best, definitely what's best for us, but.
Excellent. And so then those numbers are spread out over the different grade levels, seniors, juniors, et cetera, all the way through, like you said there.
Yeah, and it would also, our middle school numbers too, they were down last year, but I think they said they have about, 15 to 18
Nice.
middle schoolers, so that would be, last year we actually had to open it up, and this is the first time since I've been the head coach, we opened it up to let 6th graders play middle school baseball because we didn't have enough 7th and 8th graders to play, so this would help middle school all the way through high school.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
So for clarification purposes, this co-op is 9th through 12th grade levels, or are we also looking at 7th and 8th grade as well? Typically, that's a different agreement, correct?
Good question. I was understanding it'd be for all baseball.
Okay.
This is a high school league agreement. Maybe if I'm mistaken, need to do it a separate one for middle school. We can, because the 7th or 8th grader at their school, unless explicitly stated, is eligible to play on a high school
If I can
program.
clarify a little bit, this is just for the 9-12 co-op, and the middle school is a different co-op. It's not called a co-op. It's just a consolidation of both the programs, so it's not considered a state high school league.
It's what we have with FLS and
That's
STEM.
correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. So, okay, thank you. Mr. Rocha?
Chair, it seems to me that this is one of the fundamental purposes of a cooperative, is to enable our school to be competitive, not only in our conference, but across the state in our sections. Also, to be in compliance with other members of the Big Nine. so that we can compete in the Big Nine. And I would think if we can't do it on our own, if we can reach out into a cooperative, that seems to fulfill our needs. And also the opportunity for students to participate. And as you indicated, many of these students and athletes, student athletes are playing together during the summer. And now they'll have a chance to compete for the Faribault Public Schools in the cooperative. So I certainly support it.
Any other comments or questions, board members?
I'll make a motion to approve the baseball cooperative sponsorship with Bethlehem Academy.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Robichaud. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That brings us to item number 7, consider approval of boys track and field cooperative sponsorship with Bethlehem Academy.
And I have, this is our head girls track and field coach, Mr. Mark Bongers, but kind of representing track and field across the board. Mr. Chair, do you mind if we talk about them both kind of, you can vote separately, but talk about track and field in general?
Sure, if you want to give us information on both,
Yeah.
that's fine. Thank you.
Be the first one to say, from a number standpoint, we do not need this co-op, and Coach Bongers is in agreement with that. It's not to different discussion than baseball or golf, for example. It's not to be able to provide a second level or JV varsity. Different sports, different track and field is a different nature. It doesn't displace any of our kids from participating because track needs generally, there's varsity component, JV, and everyone gets to compete at some form or fashion in there. There's no like, oh, you only get so many, other than your big varsity invites. But if there's a JV component, usually there's unlimited entries, so everyone gets to participate. Track and field is definitely a strength in numbers type of sport from a team competition to get as many points as you can. So having more athletes certainly will only push us to be more competitive. Also, the continuity between, we are co-op with them in cross-country. Coach Bongers is a cross-country coach, so there's a nice natural flow between cross-country as a sport and track and field. So for those reasons, and BA's numbers are pretty low in track and field. It is a difficult sport to operate when you don't have your own track facility. So their participation numbers in track are pretty low. So this isn't going to blow us out of the water numbers-wise or anything like that. We're talking, I think last I heard from them, maybe in the 6 to 8 range per gender in the high school world for participants. So not a huge influx by any means. So any comments, Coach?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things and he mentioned that partway through here is, you know, I'm in cross country, and a number of the athletes, both boys and girls, compete in cross country, would also want to be with the same kids that they run and all follow along with, and those, you know, be able to be in there with the track and field, because the distance part of it, the boys and girls, and I said a number of them, we do have probably about 5 to 6 girls and boys alone that are in cross country. They would want to be in track, but want to run with the people they've been running with all fall long. So that's a big part of it for the program.
Board members, comments, questions? Go ahead, Ms. Cavalier.
I just feel a little confused. I don't have the flow chart in front of me, but I'm not understanding if we don't need this co-op for numbers. I think I need the flow chart in front of me. I'm feeling a little confused right now about this. I need somebody to help me through. I can't remember the specifics of the flow chart, but
I don't have it.
You don't have it with you? It's online somewhere.
Hold on, quick. I might be able to get it for you.
it was really difficult summer. We did a lot of work, and we spent a lot of time listening to a lot of people, and we came to some really difficult decisions. And all due respect, I completely understand, but this seems like an example of what we said we weren't going to do.
Do you have it?
Yes.
You were able to find it, thank you.
It says that the formation of the cooperative sponsorship is beneficial to Faribault Public Schools. A, through analysis of participation data, a reasonable person could conclude that within the foreseeable future, the activity or sport will not be able to support participation for FPS students without a co-op in place. B, the newly formed co-op will not move FPS up in a Minnesota High School League competitive classification. And C, if the activity or sport cannot be sustained independently regardless of classification. C, the newly formed co-op will entail a contractual agreement between the partnering schools covering financial details as well as clear expectations. That part's covered. I can really, somebody else can start some discussion on this topic. I got to process a little bit.
Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I don't like that flow chart. To me, I think every student, no matter what school they're coming into, should be able to play a sport. And I like cooperatives with our private schools. Again, yeah, I'll vote yes for this because we should give opportunity for our students. And you go by flow chart, try to explain that to a student. They want to play golf or they want to play soccer or track and field or whatever. I think they should have opportunity. The BA and other private school parents are taxpayers. And they pay taxes. They still support us. I think you should have the opportunity for their students to play. And it might, change our designation, but still, a student should, play. Could be a great player. Who knows what they'll develop, but to deny it, it's wrong. It's wrong.
Mr. Kleiner?
Just to comment on A, and A, I think I already touched on numbers-wise, you are right in that. B, it does not move us, point B there, it does not move us up in classification. I didn't mention that for baseball, same is true in baseball. That was one of the first things we checked, so it doesn't move us up into a higher high school league classification in the sport. So, any other questions?
Any other, Mr. Bellingham?
I do, thank you. So, a couple comments here. First of all, this was, and we didn't put it into policy for a reason, this is a procedure. And how things, when we were going through the cooperative situations, how things were going to be requested and then processed through. So I would guess, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that in the discussions with Bethlehem Academy regarding baseball, you also discussed track and field, that we have a few individualized, or we have some kids here that, because their numbers are low, whatever, that this would be good. It's a good act of faith and cooperativeness, et cetera, to include these two activities as well. And so it's really not policy, it's a procedure, and I look at it that, well, one, it does matter where you enroll your student and send them to school, and that's an individual and personal choice. It always has been and it always will be. To extend here saying, okay, we have a few kids here in the community or whatever, and this would benefit. I'm not hearing that would benefit the track team, but I do know track that you can run an extra heat or you can do an extra event and et cetera. That it's really not going to alter anything. You're giving some kids from outside of the district another opportunity. So it's my assumption that BA probably reached out and also talked with us about that as well. And it's a request from you as an activities director that basically we're bypassing this procedure or right now to include these as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to talk about the participation level because I think, and he's right, track and field is a numbers game. And I've been coaching now for 12 years for track and field and for cross country. I've had many years that I've wished that I could continue that training with my distance runners, but now as head coach for the girls, I see many times when you're in all these different, we do a lot of triangular meets and a lot of meets early on, and to be able to fill our sprinting levels and all that stuff like that, and both the boys and the girls, like there's opportunity all in every single meet for as many. And if we want to look at Big Nine, we are the lowest school in Big Nine in the girls and boys many times as far as the participation level. So yes, can we fill all the positions with the students we have? Yes. Could we be more competitive with BA involved? Yes. So I mean, I guess the question, I understand where you're coming at from the procedure standpoint, but I look at it, every kid will still compete. There's not going to be all of a sudden a change in who can or cannot compete within it, but it does give us more of a level because, and many times, and we can look at our enrollment level for the girls, we're consistently at the lowest in Big Nine for our enrollment level, and we're trying to get better with that, and we've had a good season and trying to get more girls and boys out, and that's been great, but it helps us be more competitive with those numbers, and it is a big numbers game.
I was just going to add to that. Like I said earlier, like track in every sport is really different. That's why we look at them all individually. Even the flow chart procedurally, you can have a track team with one participant. Is that a full-fledged, you can have a tiny school with one track participant and they can participate in meets. You can have 150 on a track team and still participate in meets. So it's that flow chart as being a new person is not like a perfect science, and I don't think you all intended it to be either. That's why you look at them all individually. It's in track is a unique sport where there's the team component, but also the individual events. I'm not a track and field expert. I didn't do track myself, but the individual disciplines and events within a grand scheme of a larger meet. Like you can win the meet as a team, or you could win your given event as an individual. So it's a very unique sport in that sense, almost different than any other one in high schools.
So those kids could participate, Bethlehem Academy could send those kids to a track meet, and like you said, in their individual events and et cetera, but not part of a team, not some kids not some peers that they ran with in the fall or interacted with or whatever. It's more like that, so thank you.
Mr. Olson.
2 points. Our student population is dropping, so we have less kids to participate in sports. Is that correct? The percentage of them? I would believe that it's dropping to be less students for any kind of sports. Also, part of our strategy is the family and community engagement says we will engage families and the community to help our students grow as learners and citizens. Do we actually abide by that or not?
I'd like to think we do, if that was a question to me, but I don't know if
There
it
was
was
a question,
to
is
me.
that about denying participation of students outside the Faribault Public Schools? Because I believe that they're citizens, and I believe sports help. You probably know more about that, about making good citizens.
Other questions?
In fact, I have a grandson that's going to start tennis here pretty soon. So,
Other questions or comments? I'll be honest, I struggle with Ms. Cavalier as well. I think each sport is very unique, and I think each situation is very unique. I think it was very clear-cut in my opinion, only my opinion, related to golf and related to baseball. Other sports, track, boys and girls included, are not so clear-cut in my opinion. Certainly, they have a small team. I have a daughter that runs track, and I will 100% echo Mr. Bonger's, Coach Bonger's statement that we have the smallest team there almost every meet we're at. I think that's very true. Where I really struggle with it, and I don't want to get into this big political debate, if you will, here, is when we have schools that we co-op with and they openly recruit our students away from our school, which turns into revenue, away from our district, which turns into budget cuts that we're going to talk about tonight. I have a real problem with that. I'm not pinpointing any blame on any one individual, but I know for a fact it happens. And so I too struggle with Ms. Cavalier in that flow chart. However, I will support this because I don't believe it is suppressing any Faribault Public School students from participating. Some sports it certainly will, and I can't say that I would support all of those. Once again, only me, nobody else. So I just want to make sure that's stated from my chair. Anybody else?
I guess I just need you to know that I came here ready to support these co-ops, but I feel like I haven't been given accurate information, and I don't feel confident that the procedures we put in place, if we want to undo those procedures, that's a completely different process, and that's quite frustrating to me because we put a lot of work into that, and it wasn't easy, as I've said. So I hope, I'm sorry, I don't like to be in the situation where I'm criticizing anyone who comes in front of us. It doesn't feel good to me right now, but I feel pretty frustrated. So I hope.
I don't take any of this personally, so.
No, good.
don't.
Well, then, I hope we can do it differently, because if the soccer and if you really do plan to bring the soccer and gymnastics co-ops back, then I would like to see the flow chart and the reasons why, to support every step of that. I won't be supporting this co-op, and I came in today, I had already made my decision. I was going to vote in support of these co-ops, so.
Thank you, Ms. Cavalier.
Yep.
Any further comments or questions, suggestions? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion. Now, this is just the boys track and field cooperative sponsorship with Bethlehem Academy, item number 7. I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson and a second by Mr. Robichaud. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
No.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes 5 to 1.
5-1. Thank you. This brings us to item number 8, consider approval of girls track and field cooperative sponsorship with Bethlehem Academy. Mr. Kleiner, would you like to share any additional details on this item?
No, thank you.
And I'm sorry, once again, in this 2-page, and I should have asked this on the boys, so I apologize that I didn't, but, and you maybe even said it with baseball when I brought it up, but the deadline, you've been in contact with State High
Yep,
School League, everything's okay?
They're aware of both track and field programs as well. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kleiner regarding the girls track and field cooperative sponsorship? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Steves. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
No.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes 5 to 1.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
everybody.
To all the coaches that were here, good luck this year.
Thanks, guys. See you, Mark. See you, John.
This brings us to item 9A, which is the bucket of budget reductions. Superintendent Sesker, is there anything else you'd like to add to this? I guess I don't have the tally in front of me. I haven't tallied this up, A through J, but as we spoke earlier, it's about $800,000.
I just want to check to see if we're going back to the motions and the seconds prior to the discussion, or do you want to have a discussion prior to those pieces?
No, I'm
Just
sorry,
a
that's my
bit of
fault.
clarity.
I'll entertain a motion to approve 9A, which is the bucket of budget reductions.
Also move.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Mr. Robichaud. Further discussion?
You want to clarify the motion, please?
Yes, to clarify the motion, Mr. Bellingham, would you like me to do it, or do you want to do it since you made it?
My motion was to have items A, under item 9, have items A through J together, all those considered within one motion, which has been made and seconded, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Olson, any further?
No.
Okay,
that's-
thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments regarding this? Mr. Sesker, I guess I'd ask you, is that all totals approximately that $800,000?
Yeah, that's the first list that you guys saw
Yep.
the last 2 board meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually $825,123.
825 something? Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Mr. Robichaud.
Mr. Chair, yes, just a comment or a question. These reductions, A through J, are pretty much related to decline in enrollment, that we have less students. And we would have to make those reductions no matter what, because we don't have the revenue coming in, because we're losing students. Is that correct, Mr. Sessions?
It's a direct correlation, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Olson.
Very short, I believe some of these reductions will hurt the students. That's why I'll be voting no on this.
Mr. Olson, I would tell you that I believe, my own opinion only, is that every one of these reductions, other than a revenue shift, if you will, or really an expense shift, excuse me, I think every one of these cuts will impact students in a negative way. I don't think there's one on here that will not impact students in a negative way. I firmly believe that. Unfortunately, we have to do something about a budget reduction in some level to help offset. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bellingham. We have a second by Mr. Robichaud. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No. Roll call, please.
John Bellingham.
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier.
Aye.
Richard Olson.
No.
Jerry Robichaud.
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you for that. That brings us to item 9B, which was previously 9K. So 9B, the reduction of 1.0 FTE teacher at high school, approximately $70,000. I will entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Cavalier. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Cavalier and a second by Mr. Robichaud. Any further discussion on this reduction of 1.0 FTE teacher at the high school?
Mr. Chair, if we could, so could we have a further, either from Mr. Sesker or Mr. Benty?
Probably Mr. Benty would be the best
Thank you.
person for this one.
So you're looking for what areas that this would potentially impact?
Rationale, impact,
Yeah.
yes. okay.
So this end of last week and beginning of this week today, I was able to crunch some of our registration numbers. Looking at this, what would be the 4th FTE that would be cutting at the high school, which is the one that you guys are discussing right now, it would not allow us to run some of our industrial tech classes that students have registered for. So I have to cut back in some industrial tech areas and a couple other smaller areas to be able to make this cut. So I'd be looking at cutting some industrial tech classes, making some of our Phi-Ed classes larger, and potentially not running one of our ACT prep classes.
Mr. Benty, are any of those part of what we call the 7-period day?
Well, everything's part of the 7-period
Yeah.
day. Some of these are part of our pathways, and some of them are not. So our Phi-Ed classes are more standalone classes. They're not part of our pathways pieces. Some of our industrial tech classes are. I had to shift because of our new partnership with South Central College. I needed to shift and make sure we're running those classes and cut out some other ones that we have historically run. So it's just more of a shift and moving students around based on what they registered for.
Can you give any clarity on how small those class sizes are that you would eliminate by reducing the 1.0 FTE? And I apologize, as I don't know how your scheduling and all that works.
Yeah, so the classes that we wouldn't be able to run are classes that average from sizes of like 10 to 12 in like a CAD programming, right around 10-ish in our intro to engineering. We had a few that registered for a manufacturing course. We've moved some of them around to make a little bit more sense of those registration numbers, but it would also, we've had to bump up some of our Phi-Ed numbers as well to push, mid-30s, upper 30s in some of our weightlifting courses. So safety starts to become a little bit of a concern. It's in our it's in our weight training 3, so it's students that understand and know how to use the weight room, but it's still a little bit high for what we would like at this point.
Mr. Robichaud?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Benti, you also indicated one of your AP classes?
ACT Prep.
Oh, okay. Okay. I misunderstood, I thought.
Yeah, ACT Prep is a class that we offer for our juniors and seniors. The enrollment has dropped as colleges have started to not require that, but we still did have a handful of students that registered for it.
All right, thank you.
ACT Prep, as you mentioned, several colleges have no longer require it, or at least, is that the COVID pause? Who knows? Kids that do better on ACT typically get more scholarships, potentially get into school of choice more so than not, or can you walk me through any of that
It
correlation?
really depends. Yeah, it depends on where their ACT score falls, and depending on what each college or university requires or where their levels are. So yeah, I would say that statement's fairly true.
Mr. Olson?
Could we, just an idea, on item number L, could we increase that by 70,000 so we pay for that teacher? Is that?
I believe Mr. Sesker and Mr. Gerdes ran those numbers, and I think that 100,000 is about the maximum that we can do. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yeah, that's the maximum we can legally pull out.
I remember pulling out almost 500,000.
That was before we put it into, gosh, now I'm going to get the terminology wrong. It's not unrestricted. What's the name?
Restricted.
Irrevocable trust. And then we put into that irrevocable, so it'd be harder for us to pull that out. And now there's a limitation on what we can do and what we can't do.
So the limitation is 100?
No, it's 250, and we have 150 that's already in the budget, and we added another $100,000 to that to offset some of these cuts.
Where did that 150 go to? Where did that happen?
That's part of the budget for next year, the revenues and the expenditure budget for the implicit rate. If you want Scott to come up and answer that, it just comes out of the OPEB.
Nice.
It just comes out of OPEB. Did I change anything?
Can I ask Mr. Benti?
Yeah, Mr. Benti will be right back. Yep. He's not going very far.
Don't.
So the implicit rate is actuarially determined, and so every year that number changes. It's not a static number. It's based on who has retired, who is in our plan, and the age at the time of the actuarial calculation. So for this year, for fiscal year 22, our estimated, we won't know this until it actually ends, but our estimated implicit rate is $232,501. So when we set the budget back last June, we used 150 of that in the budget. The actuarial number that I have for fiscal year 23 is $258,164. So to Mr. Sesker's point, we can go up to $258,000. So we added an additional $100,000 to go from the $150 that's already in the budget today, so we can't double dip, and added $100,000 on top of it based on these actuarial numbers from last June. Does that help, Mr. Olson?
I guess if you can't legally do it, right?
Right.
Okay, well,
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
That was the short version.
yeah, that's a short version.
Thank you for that. Ms. Steves?
Mr. Bundy, can you go back to your rationale about the, I'm going to use chamber terminology, the MEC pathway, of why the suggestion of the industrial tech, mechatronics, and
Yeah, so with our college to career programming that we've taken on pathways-wise with South Central College this year, we've created a MEC program, Manufacturing, Engineering, and Construction, which added 2 classes into our industrial technology course load. So to add those in, we had students sign up for those. We also had students sign up for all of the other regular industrial tech courses as well. So for us to honor that pathway that we've set up with South Central College, we've had to pull students out of some of the other classes and put them in that one to kind of, to make the numbers large enough to run a class, and then we don't have enough FTE in there to run some of the other courses as well. So we would be looking at cutting CAD, Intro to Engineering, and put in the 2 courses from South Central College.
Okay. So essentially, a student is still they still have an opportunity to take the mechatronics or whatever.
Yeah, they still have the opportunity to take those in place of some other courses that they maybe have signed up for.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Olson?
With these cuts, how close are we getting to 9.5? Our
The policy?
policy, sorry.
So I can kind of fill in again, call on Scott again if you'd like. With this, if you take this into account, you skip B and D, the new B and D, the FTE teacher and the ALC FOA, the OPEB revenue would get you to the 9.5.
Superintendent Sesker,
Yep.
let me
And if you want the exact number, Scott can
Let
probably.
me make sure I'm following you in that. Last week, we saw projections, and I have them up here, where if we cut 800,000, it gets us, in theory, the projection is to 9.53%,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So we heard you mention a number of roughly 825,000.
Yes.
So we're slightly over 9.53. I don't know what'll happen on this item. I don't know what'll happen on the OPEB. The OPEB does not impact a staff member. And I don't know what'll happen on 9D, which is the combination of the ALC FOA. So we're at 825,000 now, which is a little above 9.53%. Is that fair to say between you and Mr. Gerdes? Is that?
I am checking with Mr. Gerdes to make sure he has the accurate numbers.
I am pulling up the spreadsheet, so if you give me two.
Okay.
Let's just get the accurate numbers first, and then that might be better.
Thank you. So then, Mr. Olson, to your question, whatever he states here, either you add these numbers to it or you don't, and, that's where we're going to be at, right?
So if we cut $800,000, which you've exceeded already, we would be at that 9.53. So we would be a hair over 9.53 as we sit right here, right now. If you add another $100,000 to that, it'll be somewhere in that 9.7 mark. So with that OPEB number, you'd be roughly at 9.7. If you go all the way up and did all 3 of those, you'd be in excess of about 10.25%.
And board policy is 9.5.
Board policy is 9.5. Mr. Olson, does that answer your question? Yeah. Mr. Benty, is there any opportunity that you had mentioned the pathway course and whatnot? Is there any opportunity for South Central to teach any more of that program, if you will, where it's not taught by somebody at the high school, but it's taught by somebody at the at the college, and I apologize for putting you on the spot, as you may or may not know.
Yeah, that's something that we haven't really looked into because we are looking at 9th and 10th graders. So it would be a much different scenario than trying to send 12th graders across the parking lot too. So I think that would be something that would be fairly difficult. We did it, we're doing the same thing this year where we have our own person teaching medical terminology and healthcare core foundations to 9th and 10th graders in our building because we didn't feel comfortable sending them over to South Central.
Okay, any other questions on this item? We currently have a motion by Ms. Cavalier and a second by Mr. Robichaud. Once again, we do a motion and a second before we start discussion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Benty. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 5-1. Did I get that right? Okay, thank you. This brings us to item 9C, which is OPEB revenue of $100,000. And I'll entertain a motion to approve this item.
Also move, Mr. Chair.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham and a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Mr. Sesker, once again, or Mr. Gertis, this is a transfer from the OPEB fund into our general fund. In this case, it's a one-time, that's what we're approving.
Right. Yeah,
Correct?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding this? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. So, just to keep this going a second, if item 9A, which was the bucket, was at 825,000, and then we added another 170,000, we're at approximately $995,000 that has been approved in budget reductions tonight. Is that correct, Mr. Gertis, Mr. Sesker?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want a percentage too? You can probably do that real quick.
I think that's going to take us to about 9.9, give or take, 9.88, 9.9, but
So at the $1 million mark, which you're close to, it's 9.92.
And just a simple reminder, because I have to make sure I remind you guys, that we're looking at $1.9 million of deficit spending next year. And you're cutting $1 million. Okay.
So where we're at today with approved cuts, we would be moving $900,000 out of the general fund.
Yep.
We're deficit spending by $900,000 as we sit today.
That's correct.
Nothing else.
Yep. And I would be irresponsible as a superintendent not to tell you that in 2 years, if you continue this, you will be an SOD. Okay?
Okay, this brings us to item 9D, the 1.0 ALC FOA Coordinator Clerical Consolidation for $160,000 budget reduction. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion by Ms. Steves. Do we have a second? I'll ask again, do we have a second? I think MSBA guidance tells me to ask a third time, so I'll ask one more time. Do we have a second to Ms. Steves' motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion fails for a lack of second, and 9D is voted down. So just to recap, Mr. Sesker, Mr. Gerdes, I believe we made reductions on this sheet of approximately $995,000, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. With that said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this special meeting here tonight.
So moved.
I'm going to give that to Mr. Olson and a second to Mr. Bellingham.
Flip a coin.
Any further discussion? I would just like to state that this is extremely difficult, and it's difficult for our staff, it's difficult for our students. I greatly appreciate the effort that leadership has done in vetting the, if you will, the least painful budget reductions. I'm thankful to the board for all your time and effort in the continuous questions and challenges to how can we minimize the impact to students. And so thank you, and it's a difficult thing, but something that has to be done to some degree. So any other discussion or comments, anyone? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.